Hello and welcome back to Canadian Boxing Hub. I wanted to jump on today, do a bit of a roundup of some of the week's events gone by. Of course, focus on the rematch of Johnny Fisher and David Allen. Of course, Allen winning this time conclusively by fifth round stoppage. One of the more uh, fun, I would say, knockouts, if that's a good word to use for it. We love to see a big finish, an emphatic knockout, and that was what this one was. So it was a fun finish, a conclusive victory for Dave. I think a lot of folks thinking that there was some redemption there for what should have been a victory in the first one, but in this one, taking it into his own hands in the Copper Box Arena. So please do like, share, subscribe if you enjoy this content, and I'll try to turn out what I can. Busy with life and all the rest of it, but do love to talk boxing when we can. And of course, I've always been a Dave Allen fan. I'll give that caveat. I think there's a lot I can relate to him. I've always appreciated his candor, his friendliness, his honesty, his frankness. And you like to see a guy like that succeed, I guess. So I did have a bias, going into this fight. I thought he won the first one, not just by the 1 point, because I had him winning the 10th round as well. So I had him winning by 2 points with the knockdown in the first fight. And, I like Johnny Fisher. He seems like a great guy. But I believe, like many others, were just kind of disgusted and annoyed by the nonsense of Big John Fisher trying to, interject, make things about him rather than his son, and, make himself the focal point of the story here, which is obviously not the case. He brings a lot of notoriety. They shift a lot of tickets, and I'm sure a lot of those are because of the family and the antics online with all of them, not just Johnny himself. And that's great, but I think we saw the downside here, which, I think you even heard Adam Morley, manager of Johnny Fisher, after the first fight, kind of laying the groundwork of we don't need to rematch Dave Allen. I think you had Eddie Earn himself say, rematch is a possibility, but then outlined multiple other things. In the end, it seems like Johnny Fisher was the one who pushed for it. But I think this is in large part, pushing for the rematch due to his dad then, changing his tune from directly after the fight, which is, I think Dave nicked it to, we comfortably won that fight. And at some point saying Johnny won around 6, 7, 10, things just kind of, becoming a bit of a big fish story. And, like I say, none of that's Johnny's fault, but I do think that mindset and kind of the wanting to set that right and make things clear and concise in his head where he beat, Dave in the first fight. I think he was thinking, if I beat him in the second fight, it'll make the first fight feel more conclusive and I can, live with myself, which is a fair enough point, and I, applaud him for giving Dave the rematch. I, like Dave himself, kind of thought, I only see this going one way. Now, the big variable in all of this, of course, is does Dave Allen train for a fight? Does he take it seriously? Which, of course, became, again, a point of attention when on the weigh-in day Friday there, he shows up, weighs in a career heaviest 265, and you've got people like G-Man and all the others, hopping online saying, he's blown it, it's over, he's going to get knocked spark out, he's way unfit, way out of shape. I was never buying it, and I kind of scoffed at some of these guys jumping out right away and saying, like, first of all, and Dave mentioned it, 7 pounds increase from one fight to the next for a guy who is 265 pounds. That's nothing. That's a couple meals. That's a little bit extra water retained. Now, it was clear that he had put on some muscle, I think, in his traps and his shoulders and the width of his arms. And even just the way that, let's use the Fraser Clark fight for contrast. If you look at Dave and his shorts and his, groin protector there, he's got, fat rolls going over his protector. In this one, sure, he looked heavy, but his legs were looking thick and his face was looking lean, his back was looking wide, and you could tell that, yes, just like Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis had insisted, he had trained hard. Now, maybe that means, as he indicated, that he didn't cut back on the calories whatsoever and only halfway tried to eat good foods. But, guys like Dave, that makes you incredibly strong. Now, he even said that he was having a bit of a hard time going through the gears there in round 5 because he could feel the density and the weight which he had brought on. But all of these guys kind of losing their mind over 7 pounds for a heavyweight who's always fluctuated, I thought was a bit much. Of course, we're always looking for indicators of whether or not Dave Allen is trained properly for a fight, which we've only seen a couple of times. But, you didn't see the midweek haircut, which always shows signs of mental distress. You were hearing, I don't think Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis are going to bullshit us about the level of fitness of the guy. It was one thing in the past when he didn't really have a camp. He was kind of training himself in and out of other people's gyms and would show up with who knows in his corner. But now, he's clearly finally got his head straight. He's training hard. He went a little heavier this time, but it did pay dividends. He was looking like he could hurt Johnny Fisher at will. He put the pressure on him. When Johnny started to blow from trying to, kind of keep distance from Dave got to him. And when he got there, he was efficient. I think there's no doubt round 5 here against Johnny Fisher is his best round since round 3 against Lucas Brown back in 2019. You see in those rounds when he really starts to put some shots together and have some intention, and he's got his timing down. The guy's horrible. He's a problem to deal with. Like some of those combinations that cleaned out Johnny Fisher, you can just as easily see those taking out some top heavyweights, and he doesn't always fight like that. It's in glimpses, but you see what all these guys over the years, the Darren Barkers, the Peter Furies, have been talking about, that he's a hell of a fighter. He's got an incredible skill set, but we've never really seen it for an extended period in the professional ring. So happy for Dave, happy for the result. I think a little bit of justice for the result in Saudi back in December. Happy to see him, get a little trinket, which I would otherwise say is bullshit, but for him, a nice little memento. Hopefully it gives him, I think it does give him a ranking in the WBA. It'll mean good things moving forward for potential fights with the likes of David Adelaide or, others, which I think is the right move next. For Dave, I would like to see him moving towards that British title, unless he can get, some decent matchmaking with some decent exposure and maybe go do a fight in America like he's expressed he wants to do before the end of his career. But something in Sheffield or Doncaster next against a David Adelaide, or maybe the Fraser Clark rematch, but I don't know. I think that's a tough one. Plus, he's with Ben Shalom. So it'll be interesting to see what the next move is. But nonetheless, it's another decent payday for Dave Allen, which you're happy to see. And hopefully he continues training hard with the VIP gym, and we see another kind of career best performance in the next fight. But, for Johnny Fisher, what does it mean next? I think I heard Rob Tebbett say someone like a Franklin Ignatius. I think that's a good shout. They might even want a tomato can in between, something like that. I think a Franklin Ignatius doesn't necessarily crack too much. He's a decent heavyweight who's been around the scene a bit in Britain, but probably isn't going to hurt you. Either that or another fight in between, and then a Solomon Dakers or someone like that. Again, someone who doesn't necessarily crack too much, but is a decent boxer for Johnny to kind of rebuild and find where his level is going to be, whether it's English, British. I'd say that's probably the ceiling for him, but, is it English, British, or is he just kind of moving into fun paydays with other kind of notable heavyweights lower in the rankings? But I'll put a pin in that one. So that was that fight at the Copper Box on Saturday. I think a good fight. We like these domestic matchups that are, well matched and have an exciting outcome. Not all of them need to be, you know, some bullshit world title at the O2 for a good night of boxing. So good to see there. In other news, I just wanted to touch on Canadian heavyweight Alexis Barriere having some fight news announced. He's going to be fighting, it seems like in the order, he will be the co-main to the co-main. Excuse me. He will be fighting on the George Kambosos undercard in New York City, June 14th. Looking like he will be, like I say, in the third fight from the top of the bill. And looking forward to seeing him out in this one. They're matching him carefully, it seems, against a guy, Ronnie Hines, 14-0-1, 6'6", southpaw, according to BoxRec, but somewhat infrequent with his bouts, hasn't fought for a little over a year, doesn't have many finishes, which would indicate he's, you know, going to struggle with a guy like Alexis Barriere. If you can't keep him off, he'll probably get to him. So happy to see a showcase for him on a prominent card in the U.S., another DAZN card, which we can all, you know, watch this guy and see his progression in the career. So excited to see Alexis Barriere out June 14th. This will be kind of his first official fight under the Matchroom co-promotional banner. The last one seemed to be a bit of a scouting mission in Quebec City there in February. So excited to see him back out. He's been back in the gym with Kronk Jim and Sugar Hill Stewart. Hopefully he's getting some good sparring, and I imagine he is. And we see another step in the right direction and see where this guy can go. Let me know what you think about the Fisher-Allen fight. Who do you want to see each guy fight next? For Allen, where does he go? Is it straight into a British title fight, winner of TKV versus Adelaide? Or is it another direction, maybe even a Dillian White I've heard shouted out, which honestly, for each of where they are right now, might not be the worst idea. Let me know, leave a comment, and I will talk to you guys.